I'm Lena. My world used to be pretty decent, with my mom, Jane, being the cool optometrist in town and my dad, Richard, playing the hotshot plastic surgeon. Our house was always buzzing, either with mom's gentle guidance or dad's big tales of making people beautiful. Lena, pass those files, will ya? Mom would call out during her sessions at home. I loved being her sidekick, feeling kinda important in our little clinic world. Dad was another story. He'd breeze in, all charm and stories about his latest masterpiece surgeries. You know, beauty ain't just about what you see. Mom would hit back, trying to teach me something deeper. I didn't get all their jabs at each other, but I felt the chill in the air. Our dinners were a mix of medicine talk and Dad's bragging, till he started coming home late, the air thick with unsaid stuff. Late work again? Mom would dig, her voice sharp. Someone's gotta do the real work around here, Jane. Dad snapped one evening, colder than ever. Mom's face would tighten, but she kept her words locked up. Then, the storm hit. Dad had been messing around with his much younger assistant. The day he decided to bail, he packed up like he was just heading off to another conference, not leaving his whole life behind. Richard, how can you just walk out on us? Mom tried to fight, her voice all shaky. It's not you, it's me. Look after your mom, Lena, he said, barely glancing my way. His advice felt like a slap. Wasn't he supposed to be the one looking after us? What followed was a nightmare. Mom dove headfirst into a depression so bad, it felt like she'd vanished. We had to ditch our home for a cramped apartment, all cause Dad decided he wanted the house for himself and his new chick. Why's he doing this, Mom? I couldn't wrap my head around the mess. People change, Lena. Or maybe they just show their true colors. We'll get through, she whispered, but it was like talking to a ghost. She was out of it, barely holding on. We were sinking fast, and then came my grandparents, throwing us a lifeline with all the love and backup we needed. Your mom's stronger than she knows, Lena. We'll help her back on her feet, Grandpa would say, him and Grandma standing like two pillars by our side. They never trash-talked Dad, but the lesson was clear, family's what you have when the world turns its back. Then came the final blow. Dad wanted the house, all for himself and his new family. Mom was too beaten down to fight, nearly letting him have it all. But then, my grandparents stepped in, guns blazing. They hired a lawyer who fought tooth and nail, managing to claw back half the house's value. That house got sold, and with that money, Mom could afford a small apartment for us. Life took a nosedive after Dad bolted. Mom, once vibrant and full of life, became a shell of herself. Our new digs? A cramped apartment that felt more like a box than a home. The shift from our comfortable life to this was like night to day, and not in a good way. Mom's clinic work dried up. She'd stare at the phone as if willing it to ring, but it sat silent, a mocking reminder of how far we'd fallen. The days she managed to drag herself to the clinic were victories, but they were few and far between. Lena, breakfast. She'd call out on her good days, her voice lacking its usual warmth. I knew those days. It meant she was trying, for me. I'd shuffle into the kitchen, finding her staring out the window, coffee untouched. You okay, Mom? I'd ask, even though I knew the answer. I'm fine, honey. Just tired. She'd lie, plastering on a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. School became my escape. It was there I could pretend everything was normal, that my family wasn't crumbling. But kids talk, and it wasn't long before whispers of my dad's affair and our fall from grace reached my ears. Hey, Lena, heard your dad left 'cause he got tired of your mom. That true? Jack, a kid with too much mouth and too little sense, sneered one day. Shut it, Jack. You don't know anything. I'd snap back, fists clenched. I learned to fight with words, my tongue as sharp as any knife. At home, the silence was deafening. Mom and I, we were like two ghosts, passing each other in a fog of sadness. But then, Grandma and Grandpa stepped in. They were our rock, refusing to let us sink further. Jane, you can't let this beat you. "You're stronger than this," Grandpa would say, his voice firm yet filled with concern. "I know, Dad. It's just hard," Mom would respond, her voice a whisper, her spirit broken. "Hard? Life's always hard. It's about getting up, dusting yourself off, and going again. Lena needs you," Grandma would chime in, no nonsense as ever. Their visits brought light into our dim world. They helped with bills, groceries, and most of all, they brought hope. Hope that things could get better, that we weren't alone. "Lena, why don't you help me with this?" Grandma would say, handing me a recipe. Cooking became our therapy, a way to bridge the gap the silence had created. I watched Mom slowly, ever so slowly, start to come back to life. She began seeing patients again, her clinic's phone starting to ring with life. It was a slow climb, but we were making it, step by step. "You think you can handle school and helping me at the clinic?" Mom asked one day, her eyes holding a spark I hadn't seen in ages. "Yeah, Mom, I can. Let's do this," I said, my voice more confident than I felt. But I was ready to fight, ready to help us move forward. The struggles were real, but they made us stronger. The betrayal, the hurt, it was all part of our story, but it wasn't the end. It was just a chapter, one that taught us about resilience, about fighting back when life knocks you down. Then my grandparents died quietly one after the other. They left us a legacy, a bittersweet gift that propelled us into a new chapter. With it, Mom found the strength to open her own ophthalmology clinic. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of our past. "I'm thinking of naming it Visionary Futures," Mom announced one evening, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Sounds like a superhero base, not an eye clinic," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Mom chuckled, shaking her head. "Maybe so, but it's about looking ahead, Lena. We're moving forward, not looking back." I helped set up the clinic, painting walls, assembling furniture, and sorting through endless boxes of medical supplies. It was hard work, but there was a sense of hope and purpose in the air that had been missing for too long. "Lena, can you help me with this?" Mom called out from the reception area. I walked over to find her struggling with the computer system we'd installed. "Let me try," I said, taking over the keyboard. "You know, for a tech-savvy generation, I'm pretty useless at this stuff." "You're doing better than me." "I still miss paper records," Mom replied with a sigh. The clinic slowly started to take shape, becoming more than just a building. It became a symbol of our resilience. We were both learning and growing, finding our footing in this new reality. Opening day arrived faster than we anticipated. Mom was a bundle of nerves, double-checking everything and pacing the floor of the clinic. "What if no one shows up? What if we fail?" she whispered to me, her usual confidence wavering. "We won't," I said firmly, more to reassure myself than her. "You're the best eye doc in town. People will come." And come they did. The clinic was busier than we ever imagined, with patients praising Mom's expertise and the warm, welcoming environment we'd created. It felt like we were finally turning a page, leaving the shadow of Dad's betrayal behind us. In the midst of all this, I started to find my own place in the clinic. I wasn't just the daughter of the owner, I was a part of the team, helping patients and learning more about ophthalmology than I ever thought possible. "Lena, you have a real knack for this," Mom said one day, watching me interact with a particularly difficult patient. "Have you ever thought about going into medicine yourself?" I shrugged, unsure. The thought had crossed my mind, but it felt like a huge step. Maybe. I like helping people, and working here has been eye-opening, no pun intended. Mom laughed, pulling me into a hug. "Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. We've come a long way, haven't we?" "Yeah, we have," I agreed, looking around the busy clinic. "We really have." As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the clinic thrived. We were no longer just surviving, we were living. It wasn't always easy, and the shadow of the past sometimes loomed over us, but we faced each challenge together, stronger and more united than ever. After high school, I had this crossroads moment, you know? Mom sat me down one evening, her clinic files spread out like a sea around us. Lena, she started, that serious tone in her voice that always made me listen up. Have you given any thought to becoming an optometrist? You've got the brains and the heart for it. Honestly, I had tossed the idea around in my mind, playing with it like a puzzle piece, trying to find where it fit in my future. Yeah, I've thought about it, Mom. It's just big, you know? Following in your footsteps. She smiled, that warm, reassuring smile that could light up our cramped living room. Big, yes, but not impossible. You've been my right hand here since you could barely reach the counter. You've got this, Lena. So, I took the leap. I enrolled in medical college, diving headfirst into the world of medicine. Those years were a blur of textbooks, late-night study sessions, and more coffee than I care to admit. But I made it through, graduating with a sense of accomplishment that was both mine and a tribute to the path Mom had paved for me. I interned at her clinic, getting hands-on with everything from patient consultations to managing the inventory of lenses and frames. It was during this time I continued my medical education, never letting the dream of expanding our clinic fade into the background. Then came the International Ophthalmology Exhibition in our city. It was a big deal, and Mom had been buzzing about it for weeks. Lena, this could be a game changer for us, she'd said, her eyes sparkling with that familiar mix of excitement and determination. And she was right, but not just about the clinic. At the exhibition, I met Alex. He was there representing a major pharmaceutical company, and from the moment I saw him, it felt like someone had punched the air out of me. He had this easy charm, a smile that felt like it was just for me, and eyes that listened. We got to talking, first about the boring stuff, supply contracts, new drugs on the market, the usual. But then, the conversation drifted. He asked about my work at the clinic, about what it was like growing up in a family so dedicated to healthcare. You really love it, huh? The clinic, I mean, he said, leaning in, genuinely interested. Yeah, I do. It's more than just a job, you know? It's part of who I am, I replied, surprised at how easy it was to open up to him. He nodded, that smile never leaving his face. I get that. It's the same for me. Passion drives us. Things moved fast after that. Alex started showing up at the clinic, under the pretense of official pharmaceutical business, but we both knew it was more. He'd bring coffee, we'd steal moments between patients to chat, and before I knew it, I was falling hard. One day, after the clinic had closed and we were alone, he turned to me, took my hands in his, and said, Lena, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you. My heart raced, my stomach did somersaults, and all I could manage was a whispered, I love you, too. He smiled, that now familiar smile that promised so much more. Then, Lena, will you marry me? It was sudden, but then, the best things in life usually are. Yes, I said, no hesitation. Yes, I will. The excitement of the engagement consumed us. We dove into wedding planning, our days filled with talk of dates, venues, and dresses. Life at the clinic was usually a calm sea, the kind you'd want after a storm's passed. That day, though, it felt like the storm decided to make a U-turn. I was sitting behind the reception desk, scrolling through wedding dresses on the clinic's computer, dreaming, planning. That's when the door banged open, like trouble decided to walk in on two legs, dressed in expensive clothes that screamed louder than their voices. The couple, a man and a woman, strolled in like they owned the place, eyeballing everything with a mix of disdain and superiority. The man, about 60, with an air that he breathed better air than the rest of us, was the first to break the silence. Hey, we need to see the doc, pronto. Got no appointment, but tell her it's urgent. He barked, his voice grating against my already fraying patience. I plastered on my professional smile, the one Mom taught me for just such occasions. I'm sorry, but we're fully booked for the next 2 weeks. I can take your number and call you if there's a cancellation? His reaction was like I slapped him with the schedule. What? You can't squeeze in a real doctor? Do you even know who I am? Before I could muster a response that wouldn't get me fired, his gaze landed on my computer screen. The smirk that crawled up his face was enough to make my skin crawl. Looking at wedding dresses on the job? And look at you, thinking someone would marry that? I felt my cheeks burn, not from embarrassment but pure, boiling anger. Excuse me, but my personal time is none of your business. Now, if you don't have an appointment, I must ask you to leave. His laughter was like sandpaper to my ears. This is how you treat people here? No wonder this place looks like a dump. And you, girl, ever thought of visiting a plastic surgeon? That nose and those lips could use some work. I was about to launch myself over the desk and show him exactly what this girl could do when Mom came out. Her timing was always either perfect or disastrous, depending on how you looked at it. Her eyes widened in shock. Richard? The atmosphere turned electric. Richard, the illustrious father who'd taken a hike from our lives, looked like he'd just swallowed a bug. And who might you be? His voice was laced with feigned ignorance, but the venom was palpable. Mom's backbone turned to steel. The mother of the girl you've just insulted, she shot back, her tone slicing through the tension like a scalpel. His companion, a walking advertisement for plastic perfection, piped up. Let's go, honey. This place isn't worth our time. That's when Mom turned to me, her voice loud enough to cut through the standoff. Lena, this piece of work is your biological father. Be thankful he left, we're better off without his delightful company. The man, my so-called father, Richard, recoiled as if Mom's words were physical blows. His arrogance deflated slightly, revealing a flicker of something else. Was it guilt? Or just surprise at being confronted so directly? You can't talk to me like that, Jane. I've achieved things you wouldn't even dream of. He shot back, trying to recover his earlier bravado. Mom snorted. Achieved? Destroying families? Abandoning your daughter? If those are achievements, then yes, you're quite successful. The room felt too small for the growing tension. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching this surreal exchange between my parents. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away, but you just can't. Just when I thought the drama couldn't crank up any higher, Dad brushed off Mom's words like they were just pesky flies and doubled down. Look, just get the owner. My time's precious, and I'm not about to let your little clinic's reputation tank because you can't recognize importance when it's staring you in the face. Mom stood her ground, her voice calm but laced with steel. The owner? You're looking at her. And Lena here, she's not just my daughter. She's the co-owner and the future of this clinic. The look on Dad's and his new wife's faces? Priceless. Like someone had slapped them with a reality stick. Then Alex, my fiancé, sauntered in, quiet as a cat but with a presence that filled the room. Mom wasn't done, though. She launched into Dad like a missile. You left us for your assistant, stole our money, and made life a misery. But look at us now. We're standing strong, and frankly, I thank God we're rid of a nobody like you. Dad tried to puff himself up, all indignant like. Changed my mind about this place. Got my own clinic with top-notch specialists. Just needed a quick consult while on the road, that's all. That's when Alex, bless him, chimed in. Your clinic? Aren't you the same guy who botched that surgery on the Hollywood star? Got your license yanked and left drowning in lawsuits? You could practically see the steam coming off Dad. His face went from red to ghost white. That's all lies. I'm well respected in my field. Alex didn't skip a beat. Respected? The only thing you're leading in is the race to the bottom. Bankrupt, tangled in legal troubles, and now this pathetic show? Not much of a legacy. Dad just soaked it all in, face getting redder with every word, until he couldn't take it anymore. That's a load of bull. He exploded, his voice cracking under the pressure. I'm a legend in plastic surgery. My hands work magic. He gestured dramatically towards his wife, as if she was his masterpiece exhibit. Mom, Alex, and I couldn't help but take a good look at her, and, well, let's just say it wasn't a pretty sight. The work he'd done was questionable at best. Seeing our reactions, Dad's wife lost it. She hurled insults at him like grenades, her voice sharp and cutting. "Bad doctor. Bankrupt. You're a disgrace." And with that, she stormed out, leaving a silence that echoed off the clinic walls. Dad, now alone and looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, slunk off after her without another word. It was like watching the end of a sad, twisted play. After my dad and his wife made their less than graceful exit, the clinic felt lighter somehow, like we'd just aired out a room that had been closed off for too long. Mom and I shared a look, a mix of relief and disbelief. Alex stood by the reception, a silent but solid support system. "Can you believe that just happened?" I broke the silence, still reeling from the encounter. Mom let out a laugh, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Believe it? I lived it. And honestly, Lena, I'm just glad it's over." Alex came over, putting an arm around me. "You both handled that brilliantly. If that was me, I don't think I could have kept my cool." I smiled, leaning into him. "We've had a bit of practice dealing with difficult patients, but he's on another level." "Yeah, well, he's gone now. And from what I've seen, he won't be back anytime soon," Alex added, ever the optimist. Mom nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "It's strange. For so long, the thought of facing him seemed like the ultimate showdown. Now that it's happened, it feels like, I don't know, like closing a book I've been reading for too long." "That's because we're on to the next chapter," I said, feeling a surge of hope. "And this time, we're writing it on our terms." As the day wound down, I found myself staring at the door Dad had walked out of. It was just a door, but it felt symbolic, like the barrier between our past and our future. "Thinking about locking that door and throwing away the key?" Alex joked, coming up beside me. "Something like that," I admitted. "But more about all the doors that are still open for us." Mom joined us, her arm linking with mine. "He may have left a shadow here once, but we're the ones who choose what fills this place now. Love, care, and a whole lot of hard work." "Yeah, and a no jerks allowed policy," I added, earning a chuckle from both of them. As we locked up the clinic that evening, the sunset painted the sky in hues of hope and promise. The departure of shadows wasn't just about Dad leaving, it was about us stepping out from under the weight of his influence, ready to face the light of a new day. A few months down the line, the wedding bells were ringing. Me and Alex tied the knot in this cozy little ceremony. Just a bunch of our relatives and close friends, the kind of people who'd been there through thick and thin. Dad? He was nowhere in sight, which suited me just fine. The day was perfect without his shadow looming over us. Chatting with some of the docs we knew, the gossip mills were churning. Turns out Dad had crashed and burned, big time. Debts up to his eyeballs, and his last bit of property snatched away to cover some of them. And the cherry on top? A lineup of angry patients with botched jobs ready to take him to court. Karma's a real kicker, ain't it? "So, he's really tanked, huh?" I said to Mom over coffee one morning, trying not to sound too smug about it. Mom sighed, her eyes a mix of relief and something a bit softer, maybe pity. "Seems like it, Lena. But let's not dwell on it. We've got our own lives to live." "Yeah, you're right," I replied, feeling a twinge of, I don't know, something. Not exactly sadness, but close. "It's just crazy, you know? After everything." Alex, ever the voice of reason, chimed in. "Life's about moving forward, not looking back at the debris. We've got a lot to be thankful for." He was right, as usual. The wedding was a blast, a real celebration of new beginnings. And with Dad's drama finally in the rearview, it felt like we could breathe again, really breathe. "Our little family's got a bright future ahead," Mom said, her hand finding mine. "Let's focus on that." And that's exactly what we did. The clinic thrived, Our marriage was full of love and laughter, and the shadow of Dad's legacy faded into nothing more than a bad memory. We were building something new, something ours, and nothing could drag us down. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The hardships, the battles, they made us who we are. And standing there, with my mom and Alex by my side, I knew we were unbreakable. The past was just that, the past. Our eyes were set on the horizon, eager for the dawn of our new day.
I stared in disbelief as Tate casually zipped up his suitcase, his nonchalant attitude infuriating me. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Your mother's condition is critical, and you're just leaving for a business trip?" Tate barely glanced up, his cold eyes meeting mine briefly. "Hallie, we've been over this. This deal in Florida is too important to pass up. Mom's in good hands at the rehabilitation center." I clenched my fists, struggling to contain my rage. How could he be so callous? For months, I'd been the one visiting Marlene daily, ensuring she received the care and affection she deserved, while he remained consumed by his work. "You know she's not just Mom to me," I said, my voice growing louder. "She's my family too, and she needs us now more than ever. But you don't seem to care at all." Tate sighed, shouldering his bag. "Don't be so dramatic. The doctor said she's stable for now. I'll be back in a week." As he moved past me towards the door, I couldn't stay silent any longer. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I shouted, the anger boiling over. "You're a selfish, uncaring son, and I'm sick of making excuses for you." Tate paused, his lips curling into a smug smile that only fueled my fury. "Careful, Hallie, you're starting to sound like a nagging wife." In that moment, something snapped inside me. I wouldn't stand idly by while he neglected his own mother, the woman who had welcomed me into her family with open arms. As he disappeared out the door, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. Tate would pay for his indifference, one way or another. The seeds of my plan had already begun to take root, fueled by the anger and disappointment I felt towards the man I had once loved. I would make him see the error of his ways, no matter what it took. The rehabilitation center's sterile hallways seemed to stretch endlessly as I made my way to Marlene's room. My anger towards Tate had only intensified since his callous departure, fueling my determination to seek justice for his mother. As I entered the room, Marlene's tired eyes lit up, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Hallie, dear, it's so good to see you." I leaned down and gently embraced her, trying to push away the storm of emotions swirling within me. "How are you feeling today, Marlene?" She let out a soft sigh, her frail hand patting mine. "I'm hanging in there, sweetheart. The nurses have been taking good care of me." Guilt tugged at my heart. If only Tate could show a fraction of the care and devotion I felt for this remarkable woman. I forced a smile, determined not to burden her with my troubles. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "Have you had any visitors today?" Marlene's expression grew somber. "No, it's just been me and the nurses. You know how busy Tate is with his work." I bit back a scathing remark, not wanting to upset her further. Instead, I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, Marlene. I'm here for you, always." A glimmer of appreciation shone in her eyes, and she nodded gratefully. As our conversation drifted to more light-hearted topics, I found myself distracted by a folder on her bedside table. Curiosity got the better of me, and I discreetly slid it towards me. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the words "Last Will and Testament" printed on the cover. Without thinking, I flipped it open, my eyes scanning the pages in disbelief. "Marlene," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "why does this will state that you're leaving everything to me?" She paused, her gaze steady and resolute. "Because you've been the one truly caring for me, Hallie, not Tate." Tears stung my eyes as the weight of her words sank in. Marlene trusted me, valued me, in a way her own son didn't. A surge of determination coursed through me. I would make sure Tate paid dearly for his neglect. "Thank you, Marlene," I whispered, squeezing her hand tightly. "I promise. I'll take care of everything." As I left the center that day, my mind was already whirring with plans. Tate's indifference would be his downfall, and I would stop at nothing to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. In the days following my discovery of Marlene's will, a fire ignited within me, fueling my determination to expose Tate's true nature. I knew I needed irrefutable evidence of his neglect, something that would shatter any illusion of devotion he tried to maintain. The first step was installing hidden cameras in Marlene's room at the rehabilitation center. With the help of a tech-savvy friend, I strategically placed the tiny devices, ensuring they captured every angle. I would document Tate's indifference firsthand. As the days ticked by, the footage painted a damning picture. Tate's visits were few and far between, often lasting mere minutes before he rushed off, citing work commitments. On the rare occasion he did linger, his disinterest was palpable, scrolling through his phone or making hasty exits whenever Marlene attempted conversation. But the true depths of his callousness became apparent during one particularly painful incident. Marlene had fallen ill, her condition deteriorating rapidly. The nurses had called me in a panic, urging me to come quickly. When I arrived, flustered and terrified, I found Marlene writhing in agony, her face contorted in pain. The nurses informed me they had tried contacting Tate repeatedly, but he hadn't answered. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. "This is his own mother." The nurse's expression was one of resignation. "We haven't been able to reach him, Miss Jensen. He's not answering our calls." In that moment, something inside me snapped. I would make Tate answer for this, no matter what it took. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously gathered testimonies from the nurses and caregivers, documenting every instance of Tate's negligence. Their accounts painted a damning picture, a son so consumed by his own ambitions that he had abandoned his ailing mother. With each new piece of evidence, my resolve only grew stronger. Tate would face the consequences of his actions, even if I had to drag him kicking and screaming into the harsh light of truth. As I reviewed the footage and statements, a plan began to form in my mind, a reckoning that would leave no doubt as to the depths of Tate's indifference, and when the time came, I would be ready to strike. The sharp trill of my phone cut through the silence, and I glanced at the caller ID with a mix of trepidation and hope. It was the rehabilitation center. Taking a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for whatever news awaited. "Miss Jensen?" The nurse's voice was tinged with excitement. "You'll never believe it. Marlene's condition has improved dramatically over the past few days. The doctors say her recovery is nothing short of miraculous." A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of determination. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, a chance to make Tate face the consequences of his neglect once and for all. "That's wonderful news," I replied, already formulating my plan. "When can I bring Marlene home?" The nurse's voice brightened. "The doctors have given the all clear. She's ready for discharge whenever you're able to pick her up." "Perfect. I'll be there as soon as I can." Hanging up the phone, I wasted no time. I gathered the evidence I had meticulously compiled, the damning footage, the nurse's testimonies, every shred of proof of Tate's indifference. With Marlene by my side, we would confront him together, leaving him no room for excuses or lies. When I arrived at the center, Marlene was already waiting in the lobby, her vibrant smile a stark contrast to the frail woman I had grown accustomed to seeing. She embraced me tightly, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Hallie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for never giving up on me." I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You don't need to thank me, Marlene. I'm just glad you're feeling better." As we made our way to my car, I couldn't help but notice the renewed strength in Marlene's step. It was as if her determination had reignited, fueling her recovery. And in that moment, I knew she was ready to face her son's cruelty head-on. Once we were settled in my apartment, I wasted no time in laying out the evidence I had gathered. Marlene's expression hardened as she watched the footage, her jaw clenching with each new instance of Tate's neglect. "That heartless boy," she muttered, her voice trembling with anger. "How could he treat his own mother this way?" I reached out and clasped her hand in mine, my gaze unwavering. "We're going to make him pay, Marlene, together." A determined glint shone in her eyes, and she nodded resolutely. "Whatever it takes." As we pored over the details of our plan, a sense of righteousness washed over me. Tate had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. With Marlene by my side, nothing could stop us from seeking the justice we deserved. With Marlene's recovery progressing remarkably, the time had come to set our plan in motion. We would make Tate answer for his cruelty, exposing his true colors in front of those he respected most. "Are you sure you're up for this, dear?" I asked Marlene as we pored over the guest list. "We can postpone if you need more time." Her steely gaze met mine, resolution etched into every line of her face. "No more delays, Hallie. That boy needs to be taught a lesson, and I intend to be there when he gets it." I nodded, suppressing a smile at her unwavering determination. Together, we finalized the invitations for a family dinner under the guise of celebrating Marlene's miraculous recovery, but our true intentions were far more sinister. One by one, I reached out to our guests, close friends and relatives who had witnessed Tate's neglect firsthand. Their outrage at his behavior only fueled our resolve, and they eagerly agreed to attend, eager to see justice served. As the preparations unfolded, a palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. Marlene and I worked tirelessly, ensuring every detail was perfect. The table was set with exquisite care, the meal meticulously planned, and the evidence, the damning footage and testimonies, carefully organized, ready to be unveiled at the opportune moment. Finally, the night of the dinner arrived, and our guests began to trickle in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled concern. They had no idea what was in store, but their trust in us was unwavering. As Tate strode through the door, fashionably late as always, a hush fell over the room. His eyes widened briefly at the sight of Marlene, vibrant and radiant, before his customary smirk slid into place. "Mother," he drawled, leaning in to plant a perfunctory kiss on her cheek, "you're looking well." Marlene's gaze was icy, her tone clipped. "Yes, thanks to Hallie's unwavering care and support." Tate's brow furrowed, but before he could respond, I stepped forward, my heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and righteous fury. "Shall we get started?" I gestured towards the dining table, my voice ringing with false cheer. As the meal progressed, the tension in the air was palpable. Tate regaled the guests with tales of his latest business exploits, oblivious to the scrutinizing glances darting his way. Marlene and I exchanged covert glances, our hands clasped tightly beneath the table, silently reassuring each other. Finally, as dessert was served, I cleared my throat, commanding the attention of everyone present. "Before we conclude our evening, there's something we'd like to share with you all." Tate's brow furrowed, but he remained silent, his curiosity piqued. With a slight nod from Marlene, I pressed play on the remote control, and the damning footage began to roll, bathing the room in an eerie glow. Tate's face contorted in horror as the evidence of his neglect played out for all to see, his mask of indifference shattered. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of Marlene's voice, steady and resolute. "You've disappointed me for the last time, Tate." As the implications of her words sank in, Tate's veneer of composure crumbled, his true colors on full display. And in that moment, I knew our retribution was complete. The deafening silence that followed Marlene's declaration was shattered by the scraping of Tate's chair as he abruptly stood, his face contorted in rage. "How dare you?" he spat, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You're going to take the word of this woman over your own son?" Marlene's gaze remained steady, her expression unflinching. "The evidence speaks for itself, Tate. You've had countless opportunities to be there for me, but you chose your selfish ambitions instead." Tate's nostrils flared, and he rounded on me, his eyes blazing with accusation. "This is your doing, isn't it? You've been poisoning her against me from the start." Before I could respond, Marlene raised a hand, effectively silencing him. "Enough, Tate. Hallie has shown me more love and devotion than you ever have. She's the one who deserves my gratitude, not you." A murmur rippled through our guests, their expressions ranging from shock to righteous indignation. They had witnessed Tate's true colors, laid bare for all to see. Tate's gaze swept the room, his desperation palpable. "You can't all seriously believe this charade? She's manipulating you, can't you see?" But his pleas fell on deaf ears. One by one, our friends and relatives voiced their support for Marlene's decision, recounting their own experiences with Tate's neglect and indifference. As the onslaught of testimony continued, Tate's bravado crumbled, his mask of arrogance slipping away to reveal the pathetic, selfish man beneath. He slumped back into his chair, head in his hands, as the weight of his misdeeds bore down upon him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he raised his head, his eyes hollow and defeated. "Mother, please, Give me another chance. I'll do better, I swear. But Marlene's resolve was unshakable. It's too late for promises, Tate. You've made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences. With those words, she reached into her pocket and withdrew a document, sliding it across the table towards him. These are the revised terms of my will. As of today, you have no claim to my assets or estate. Everything will be left to Hallie. Tate's eyes widened in disbelief as he scanned the pages, his face draining of color. You can't do this to me. But his protests were met with stony silence. Marlene had made her decision, and there was no turning back. As the evening drew to a close, our guests filtered out, offering words of support and congratulations. Tate remained slumped in his chair, a broken man, his world crumbling around him. Marlene approached me, her expression a mix of sorrow and resolution. It's done, Hallie. He brought this upon himself, I nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You did the right thing, Marlene. Now we can move forward, without his toxicity weighing us down. As we surveyed the aftermath of our reckoning, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Tate had been exposed for the selfish, heartless man he truly was, and he would never again be able to hurt or neglect those he claimed to love. It was a bittersweet victory, but one that was necessary for our healing to begin. In the days following our explosive confrontation, a tense silence descended upon the house. Tate had retreated into his study, emerging only for brief periods with a haunted look in his eyes. The reality of his actions had finally caught up to him, and the consequences were devastating. I expected him to lash out, to rage against the injustice of it all, but instead he seemed defeated, a mere shadow of the arrogant man he once was. It was almost pitiable, watching him grapple with the weight of his own selfish choices. Almost, but not quite. Marlene, on the other hand, carried herself with a newfound sense of purpose. The burden of Tate's neglect had been lifted, and she was determined to make the most of her second chance at life. I want to sell the house, she announced one morning over breakfast, her voice steady and resolute. I nearly choked on my coffee. Sell the house? But this is your home. She waved a dismissive hand. It's too big for just the two of us, and it holds too many memories of. She trailed off, but the implication was clear. This place was tainted by Tate's indifference. Of course, I murmured, reaching across the table to give her hand a gentle squeeze. Whatever you want, Marlene, I'm with you every step of the way. Her eyes softened and she returned the gesture, a small smile tugging at her lips. I know, dear, and I'm grateful for that. In the weeks that followed, I set about making preparations for the sale. Tate remained holed up in his study, emerging only to half-heartedly protest our decisions before retreating once more. You can't just cut me out like this, he snarled one evening, his eyes wild with desperation. Marlene, please reconsider. I'm your son. But Marlene was unmoved, her gaze steely and unwavering. You made your choice a long time ago, Tate, and now you have to live with the consequences. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I almost felt a twinge of pity for him. Almost. As the moving date approached, I caught glimpses of Tate making furtive phone calls, his brow furrowed in concentration. I knew he was grasping at straws, searching for any legal loophole that might allow him to contest Marlene's decisions. But his efforts were in vain. Unbeknownst to him, I had already taken steps to ensure that Marlene's wishes would be carried out to the letter. With the help of a trusted attorney, we had dotted every I and crossed every T, leaving no room for Tate's interference. The day we finally loaded the last of our belongings into the moving truck, I caught Tate watching from the window of his study, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of something akin to regret cross his features. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. As we pulled away from the house, leaving Tate and the remnants of our former life behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was the end of an era, but also the beginning of something new, a future where Marlene and I could forge our own path, unburdened by the toxic presence of her neglectful son. And as for Tate, well, he would have to learn to live with the consequences of his actions, just as we had lived with the pain of his indifference for far too long. The warm summer breeze caressed my face as I stepped out onto the balcony of our new apartment, a sense of peace washing over me. It had been 6 months since Marlene and I had left the old house behind, and the change had been transformative. "Hallie, dear, come take a look at this." Marlene's voice rang out from inside, filled with excitement. I hurried back into the living room, where she was beaming at me from her favorite armchair, a stack of glossy brochures in her lap. "What is it?" I asked, unable to contain my own smile at her infectious enthusiasm. "I've been researching art classes," she explained, patting the seat beside her in invitation. "There are so many wonderful options in the area, and I think it would be the perfect way for you to get back into teaching." My heart swelled with gratitude as I settled next to her, scanning the brochures with renewed interest. Teaching had been my passion before the chaos of recent years, and the prospect of returning to it filled me with a sense of purpose. "These look amazing. Marlene," I murmured, squeezing her hand affectionately. "Thank you for thinking of me." She waved away my thanks, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Nonsense, dear. You've done so much for me. It's the least I can do to support your dreams." As we pored over the class listings, chatting animatedly about the possibilities, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. The dark cloud of Tate's neglect had lifted, allowing us to bask in the warmth of our newfound freedom. In the months since our confrontation, I had barely heard from Tate. A part of me wondered if he had finally accepted the consequences of his actions, or if he was simply biding his time, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. But those thoughts were quickly pushed aside as Marlene's laughter filled the room, her energy and zest for life a constant reminder of the strength she possessed. "You know, Hallie," she mused, her expression turning contemplative, "I never would have had the courage to stand up to Tate if it weren't for you." I opened my mouth to protest, but she held up a hand, silencing me. "No, let me finish. You showed me what it truly means to care for someone, to put their needs above your own, and in doing so, you gave me the strength to take back control of my life." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as I listened to her heartfelt words, overwhelmed by the depth of her gratitude. "Thank you, Marlene," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "for trusting me and for giving me the chance to be a part of your family." She reached out and cupped my cheek, her touch gentle and reassuring. "You are my family, Hallie, and together we've created something beautiful out of the ashes of Tate's selfishness." In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our bond forged through the fires of adversity and strengthened by our unwavering support for one another. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The path forward may not be easy, but with Marlene by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. And as for Tate, well, he had made his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences, alone, without the love and support of the family he had so callously discarded. It was a harsh lesson, but one that he had brought upon himself, and in the end, his loss was our gain. A chance to start anew, to build a life filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond of chosen family.